कृष्ण श्री गुरुवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम राम। So yesterday we were discussing about wants and needs, and how being want driven is not a good proposition. And then rather than being want driven, one has to be purpose driven. So what it means to be purpose driven? Purpose driven means we are driven to do what we do by a sense of purpose in life, something that is larger than us, something that is beyond us. So a purpose driven mindset means we start to see beyond ourselves. Now, first of all, being purpose driven is much more satisfying than being want driven, because the nature of the soul is to serve, and to serve selflessly as the innate nature of the soul. So somebody who is purposeful in life uh, has a purpose beyond themselves. Such a person experiences much more inner content, inner satisfaction in life. There is this, once a big industrialist, he had come to a temple, and during those days, Gorang Prabhu used to be here. Like he's just Gordanic village wasn't in place. So this industrialist told him that the vast amount of resources that I have is like the unlimited quantity of water contained in a ocean. Now, the characteristic of ocean water is the quantity is huge, but it can't quench your thirst. And then he said, what I have, the unlimited wealth that I have is like, water contained in an ocean. It can't quench my thirst. Whereas you might be having limited resources because you're a monk. But what you have is like the water contained within a well. And water contained within a well might be less, but it has the unique um property to be able to quench people's thirst. So similarly, it doesn't really matter how much we have. What really matters is what is our attitude towards life. Are we self-centered or are we other-centered? And so, I give this example often that people, why do people have children? Because from a materialistic perspective, uh, having a child is nothing but loss business, because you have to, since the very birth of the child, you start spending on the child. You kind of, for the garments of the child, and then as the child grows up, for the child's education, for so many things, so much time and resources, so much money is being spent. And if you strictly think in terms of profit and loss, there is more loss than profit. But nonetheless, people want to have children. Why? Because it's the hunger of the soul to have something beyond yourselves to serve. So as soon as you have a child, you have something in your life beyond yourselves to serve. I was talking to one person here close by. He is into the catering business, so big time catering business, pan India catering. So he was telling me during my younger years, I was very like, my real desire, I had the ambition of achieving more and more and more and more. And he did grow the business. He took the business over from his father and did grow it. And then he said that now he has a son. He said that now all I want is my son's happiness. So basically, he didn't say it in this language, but naturally he went from being want driven to be a purpose driven person. And he's much more satisfied now from that perspective. So that's the nature of having a purpose in life. It gives much more satisfaction than being want driven. And because it gives much more satisfaction, uh, when when we are purpose driven, we are able to overcome obstacles with more ease. If you're want driven, we find obstacles insurmountable in our life's journey. Now, speaking about children, my sister, she had two kids, one girl and one boy. And her son, when he was 21, he was detected with fourth stage cancer, chondrosarcoma, which is a very aggressive kind of cancer. It's a whole body cancer. And I visited her during that time, and she was whole day she was working so hard, taking care of the son. And even at night, he couldn't turn over because of the bodily pain. He had a tumor just near his spinal cord. So he had difficulty sleeping in the same position at night, and he used to wake up every now and then. Every time he woke up, my sister also used to wake up. So she hardly got to sleep at night, and whole day she was so busy working so hard. And on top, she was kind of scouting for doctors, the best of doctors. She tried to contact doctors in Bombay, obviously doctors in Bangalore, from all across India. So it was like unbelievable the kind of energy she had. Now, you know, if you want to hire a nurse to replace her, it's almost impossible. No, doesn't matter how much amount of money you pay to the nurse. Being so kind of, so being so determined to push ahead despite all obstacles is impossible when you're want driven. But when you're purpose driven, anything is possible, practically speaking. I was wondering from where is she finding so much of energy, so much of power to overcome such unimaginable obstacles. And it was not for a few days, it went on for weeks and then months and then for years. So yeah, so in management circles, there is this story, right, that you go to, there are masons. Masons are the people who work on buildings. They're the laborers who are into construction. So you walk up to one of these masons who is, laying bricks to make a building, and you ask him, "How do you like your job?" And he says, "It's very hot. The bricks are very heavy, and every time I have to pick up the bricks. The back hurts, and then the job is monotonous, but it pays the bills." That's the answer he gives. But then you go to another mason and you ask the same question: "How do you like your work?" And he says, "I love my work." And he says almost the same things. It's scorching heat, so it sweats, it's uncomfortable, the bricks are heavy, the back hurts, and the work is monotonous. But I love my work because I'm constructing a church. In the Indian context, we can have it as I'm building a temple. So basically, the second mason is going through the same obstacles as the first mason, but the second mason is seeing a bigger picture, has a purpose beyond himself. So when we have a purpose beyond ourselves, then it becomes much more easier to overcome the obstacles, the challenges that we come across inevitably in our personal lives. And the third advantage of being purpose driven is that, see, when you are want driven, you're constantly looking for validation from external sources. And so people get into a competitive mode and things like that. But somebody who's purpose driven doesn't require external validation, because a sense of purpose is driving that person. And because that sense of purpose is coming from within, such a person is not looking for external validation from external sources. And such a person is less likely to get into comparison, competition, which is such a huge challenge in the modern day world. People get into comparisons. And we're living in a very strange world wherein we are more connected than any time in history, perhaps in recent history at least. Because you know, uh, it's during our school days when the foundations of competition and comparison are kind of laid. So we start competing and comparing right from our childhood, right from our school days. And generally, if we rewind back to 30 or 40 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago, people used to move on in life and they used to lose touch with their school friends. They used to lose touch with their college friends. And the only people they used to compare themselves, the only people they used to compete with are the people around them in the office or maybe in the same industry, whatever it could be. But we're living in such an interconnected world today that the scope of competition, the scope of comparison has just grown so huge. So we sometimes might end up comparing ourselves from some school friend, you know, first standard or second standard. And then we might be just, maybe whatever, vice president or something in a company, whatever, team leader in a company or something like that. And then we see on social media that your friend from school is now a CEO of a corporation or a founder of a company or something like that. And then you remember your school days and you think that this person used to copy my copy from my paper in the examinations, and now he is a CEO and I'm still a team leader. And that person is in some other part of the world and you're here, and we go into depression. Such things are happening in the modern day world because people are one driven, and on top, the opportunity for competition, the opportunity for comparison has become unlimited in the modern day world. So we're living in a very crazy world. So it's all the more important to move from being one driven to be purpose driven, so that we stop comparing, we stop competing. A person who is purpose driven competes with himself or herself rather than with others. So there's this story which is very popular again in management circles, that a person, uh, he goes to a beach and he sees that on the beach there are so many uh, starfish all lying on the shores on the beach. Some high tide has brought all these starfishes onto the shore, and then you know then the low tide, and so the starfishes are left on the shore. And starfishes, they can survive on land for a few hours, and beyond that they die. And then he sees, the entire beach is covered with so many starfishes, and he feels sorry for them, and picks one starfish at a time and starts throwing it into the waters back again. So another passerby who's going by the road, he sees somebody is doing something and he's intrigued, and he comes close and sees that this person is throwing this starfishes back into the sea. And he taps this person and he says, what exactly are you doing? And this person says, can't you see I'm, trying to rescue these starfishes and not allowing them to die on the beach. And the second person, he says that just look around you, man. There are so many starfishes. Uh, how many can you save? What difference will you make? He says. And the first person, he doesn't reply. He just picks up another starfish, throws it back into the water, points in the direction of that fish, which is kind of plopping into the water, and says that it made a difference in that starfish's life. So this first person was driven by a sense of purpose to save the lives of the starfishes. So he didn't get into the mood of achievement mode. So when we are want driven, we're in an achievement mode. And when we're in an achievement mode, we are always thinking in terms of what difference I'll make and things like that. When we are purpose driven, we are actually aware, we're conscious of our actions, and because we're driven by a sense of purpose, we have more clarity. And we don't want external validation. We don't want others to call us a success story in life. We know internally that I am a success because I'm making a difference in the life of each starfish. And that's good enough to motivate me to keep my drive alive. As simple as that. And imagine a scenario. I'm extending this story a little further. Imagine the second person. He also assists the first person in throwing the starfishes back into the water. Now, if the first person is want driven and not purpose driven, then he'll get into a competitive mode. But if the first person is purpose driven, he'll become happy. The more, the better. The more starfishes will be saved if two people are involved. So rather than feeling a sense of competitiveness, the person will be happy to cooperate. So all these things which are spoken about in the modern day world to increase efficiency comes about automatically when we are purpose driven in life. And so because we have a sense of inner fulfillment, we are more capable of overcoming obstacles, and we are not looking for external validation of our efforts. We're driven internally rather than externally. The chances of success in our endeavors also grow significantly when we are purpose driven rather than when we are want driven. And so we see that people who are purpose driven are more successful. Now, this entire idea of being purpose driven, couched in different terminology, you can find it all over the place nowadays. It's not a new concept that I'm speaking here. There's this book by Simon Sinek called Start with the Why. And then, Tony Robbins, he speaks about becoming a why man. See, why means start with the why means what? Start with why you're doing what you're doing, means focus on the purpose, right? So basically, this idea of being purpose driven, it has become more popular nowadays recently. The Gita has always been speaking about being purpose driven. So this is something which is noteworthy actually, because if you see self-help books from maybe uh, 30 or 40 years ago, there's not so much of emphasis on being purposeful. It's like a new discovery which people are talking about nowadays of being purposeful, but it's not a new discovery when we kind of go through the Vedic literatures, because Bhagavad Gita has always spoken about being purposeful. And then these modern gurus, the modern self-help market, they speak about being purpose-driven, etc. But then it ends there. They don't exactly have the formula of how to go from being want-driven to become purpose-driven. So the Bhagavad Gita doesn't just speak about being purpose-driven, it also gives us, it chalks out a plan of action for, for going from being want driven to become purpose driven, which is very unique. Because there has to be a proper procedure to make this transition. Because many times people hear about being purposeful and then, they stretch themselves to become more purpose driven, paying less heed to their own personal wants. And then after a while, they feel like, oh my God, being purpose driven means you come into the spirit of helping others, giving others. And then a lot of time it might end up in frustration, thinking that, I shouldn't have been so selfless. A lot of people, they think, even sometimes even parents who are purpose driven when the child is very small, when the child grows up and the child doesn't, take proper care of parents, doesn't doesn't respect them, or doesn't appreciate or acknowledge them, then even sometimes parents, they feel like, why did we sacrifice so much for our children and things like that. So sometimes this transition from being want driven to purpose driven can end in frustration. And at other times, to take off from being want driven to being purpose driven, it itself could be a challenge, because we are so much habituated to being want driven that we find it very difficult to be purpose driven, because we might start some endeavor with a selfless kind of attitude, but because we are so habituated to being selfish, insidiously the selfish part of us reemerges, and we find ourselves being want driven, even though we started off the endeavor being purpose driven. In due course of time, we end up becoming want driven. See, generally, for most people, when you take up a responsibility in life, we might take up a responsibility in life with a selfless intent.
Yes.
But in due course of time, we become attached, right? And then sometimes people feel, I don't want, this kind of undue attachment. And in the name of detachment, they tend to become irresponsible. So the Gita speaks about being responsible, at the same time being detached. Responsibility is the goal here. Being purpose driven and steering clear from being want driven. So a clear plan of action is required to make this transition and make it smooth. So that's why in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Karmendriye karma yogam asaktasya vishishyate. When Arjuna proposes to Krishna that, I don't want to indulge in this ghastly warfare and I want to go to the forest, Krishna urges him, better than going to the forest. Why? Because going to the forest won't be a sustainable option for you, because you're used to working within this world. I don't know whether you're aware of this, that there is this a landmark study that was conducted some university in the United States, wherein were told to sit alone in a room quietly for 15 minutes. And they were not allowed to carry any gadgets with them. They just had to sit alone in the room, just with their thoughts. Or alternatively, they're given an option that rather than sitting quietly, they could give themselves mild electric shocks. And this mild electric shocks was quite, painful. Nonetheless, as it turned out, I don't remember the exact percentage, but around 70 to 75% of the students chose electric shocks or staying alone with their thoughts. So it's not easy to just live with your internal world. So especially as beginners on the spiritual journey, we need activity. And so karma yoga is the option. So we keep acting, but we change the intention behind our actions. So far, the intention behind our actions was a selfish want. So we need to change that intention from a selfish want to a selfless purpose. And so Krishna, he introduces the topic of karma yoga in the third chapter. And immediately after that, he starts speaking about yagyas in the Bhagavad Gita. Because all through the Vedic literatures, in fact, whether it be the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharvaveda, more than 90% of all these Vedas, they speak about sacrificial performances. Now, obviously, not obvious, but um, most people, when they hear about sacrifices or yagyas, the thing that comes to mind is, fire and yagya surrounding that. Of course, the major chunk of the sacrifice or yagyas that are mentioned in the Vedas has to do with the fire, the sacred fire. But then there are a lot of fire-free yagyas also. Like, for example, there is Dravyamaya Yagya, which is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, which is about giving charity. That is Dravyamaya Yagya. Then there is Swadhyaya Yagya, means study of the scriptures. So there are so many other yagyas that are mentioned in the Vedas, which has got nothing to do with fire. Basically, the concept of yagya is we do something for someone else. And this is a paradox here. These yagyas, as are mentioned in the Vedas, are directed towards fulfilling one's needs or wants. But these yagyas are designed in such a way that when we fulfill our wants and needs through performance of these yagyas, slowly but surely, we go from being want-driven to being purpose-driven. So they're designed in such a way. See, so it's very interesting. So more than 90% of the Vedas, they speak about how to fulfill your wants, how to fulfill your needs. But then they give you the Vedic formula for fulfilling your wants, fulfilling your needs. In the modern day world, if we want something, if we need something, we go get it through our own personal endeavors. Now, of course, the Vedas speak about personal endeavors, but there's a balance between Daiva and Purushartha. The Vedic formula is, yes, you have to put in your endeavor, but we also need to depend upon higher powers. And that's how the concept of the yagyas comes into the picture. So if you want something, okay, you perform so and so yagya towards this particular devata, and your desire will be fulfilled. So apparently the person is involved in fulfilling one's wants. But through the process, something miraculous happens repeatedly when the person keeps performing yagya all through one's life. And yagyas were very common in a Vedic civilization. And so within a few decades, within the lifespan, as long as the grahastha ashram lasted of a living entity, that period was sufficient for that person to completely transform from being want-driven to being purpose-driven, simply through performance of yagyas. Yagyas were an everyday affair, so to speak, during the Vedic times. And to get an idea of how exactly this works is, surrounding any yagya ceremony which is recommended in the Vedas is, there are so many activities which all about giving, 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 giving. Like Vivaha Yagya is also one kind of Yagya, wherein a person is going through that Vivaha Yagya maybe to fulfill a want. You want some kind of companionship. So, driven by a sense of want, you get into Vivaha Yajna. But the Yajna ceremony is designed in such a way that you end up doing a lot of selfless actions during the ceremony itself. So you invite a lot of people. So you spend money on feeding people who are attending the Vivaha Yajna. So it's an integral part of it. So an integral part of every Yajna in the Vedic system was doing something that is selfless, whether it be putting something into the sacrificial fire, or whether it be feeding people who have come to attend the yajna. Regardless of what the ceremony is, people ended up intertwined within the ceremony were lots of acts of selfless service. And any habit, it is kind of driven by a craving for pleasure. See, the nature of, habit, what sustains a habit? Habit is nothing but any activity which the mind has made it automatic. And the mind tends to make those activities automatic, which gives us pleasure. So, for example, we open an account on Instagram, and when we go through the reels, funny reels are there, informative reels are there, and it gives you a sense of pleasure. And then again, after a while, again you open your Instagram, again you go through this. And after a while, subconsciously also, when you feel a sense of boredom, automatically you reach out to the smartphone and you open the Instagram and unthinkingly start going through the reels. Why? Because the mind has made that activity automatic, because you have derived some kind of pleasure out of it. Now, after a while, it might so happen that you start realizing, oh my God, I am wasting so much of time on Instagram. And at the end of going through all those Instagram reels, you might feel a sense of misery, actually. My God, I wasted such a lot of time. But the habit doesn't cease there. The habit doesn't cease. Why? Because the mind still is craving for that pleasure that you initially derived when you first got in touch with Instagram. So what really drives a habit is not exactly pleasure, but the craving for that pleasure. That's what drives any habit, for that matter. So to go from being want driven to become purpose driven, the mind should start craving for the pleasure of from the pleasure of being purposeful. So through these yajna performances, through every yajna that we perform, a quantum of pleasure we derive. You derive a quantum of pleasure. From external perspective, you are performing a yajna to fulfill a selfish want or a selfish need, perhaps. But in the process, your heart, your soul is also experiencing, your subconscious mind is experiencing a quantum of happiness which is derived from the selfless activities which is ingrained in the yajna performance. And over time, as you repeatedly continue performing yajna after yajna, day after day, month after month, year after year, slowly but surely you start craving. That craving develops because the joy derived from selflessness is much more than the joy derived from selfishness. And through repeated performance of these yajnas, what happens that in due course of time, the heart or subconscious mind starts craving for the joy of selflessness. And this is the Vedic formula, basically, for us to make this transition from being want driven to being purpose driven through the performance of yajna. So Krishna very beautifully explains yajnas in the 3rd chapter, then again in the 4th chapter, because the chapter number 2 to chapter number 5 is all about karma yoga, and a very integral part of karma yoga is performance of yajnas, because these yajna performances take us from being want driven to being purpose driven. And one more subtle point is here, sometimes people might feel that why those elaborate rituals uh, surrounding the Vedic sacrifice, what purpose does that serve? Now, every ritual in the Vedic ceremony, I spoke about so many other things in the Vedic ceremony which enhances a selfless spirit. But the rituals within the Vedic ceremony gives our subconscious mind a sense of dependence on higher powers. Because, see, an integral part being want driven is also the tendency to be the controller, to be the doer. As long as we have this mentality of being in total control of situations, as long as we have this mentality that I am the doer of my activities and I am the sole go-getter in life, then we'll remain want driven in life. To be truly purpose driven, we should get rid of this tendency to be the controller, the tendency to be the doer. The reason is simple. If you're putting someone else's interest before your own, then naturally, the lesser a sense of control you have, the more effective you will be. If you're trying to control the other person, or if you're trying to control everything, if you have this mentality of being the controller, you're putting yourself in the center still. So, an integral part of being purpose driven is also to get rid of this tendency of being the controller and the tendency of being a doer. And these rituals that surround yajnas gives us a sense of dependency on higher powers. And this sense of dependency or interdependency on higher powers is the antidote from being the controller or a doer. So, yajna performances, they help us in 2 ways. They give us the higher taste of selfless service, and also they help us get rid of the tendency of being a controller, the tendency of being a doer. Now, so the yajnas, as mentioned in the Vedas, they're designed in such a way that slowly but surely they take us towards the highest purpose that a human being can aspire for in life. Now, as I was saying, even if we are purpose driven to serve our children, that's also purpose driven technically, because we are going beyond ourselves. But then we might go beyond our immediate family and things in terms of serving society. That's a greater level of being purpose driven. And then higher still is being purpose driven to serve the country. But what is that purpose which is all inclusive? That includes humanity, that includes all living entities, and obviously which includes family and everything. That is when you are purpose driven to serve God. So, because God is a source of everything, He is a source of all human beings, He is a source of all living entities. So, when we are purpose driven to serve God, then we are naturally purpose driven to serve His parts and parcels. Not just human beings, but all the animals, all the plants, all trees, every living entity, we are purpose driven to serve everybody. So it's a purpose that is all inclusive. We are purpose driven to serve God. And these yajna performances, as I mentioned in the Vedas, are designed in such a way that we become, first of all, purpose driven from being want driven. And secondly, they take us closer and closer towards the ultimate purpose of serving God, which is an all-inclusive purpose. Now the question remains that in the modern day world that we are living in, wherein we are far removed from the Vedic times, wherein yajnas were an integral part of people's lives. Actually, just to give you an example, my parents, they live in the village. So growing up, I saw them performing these yajnas, pujas, and all. Even during their generation, it was quite commonplace. People used to perform a lot of yajnas every now and then. And obviously, I was very conscious that my parents were doing all these yajnas uh, for satisfying some wants. They wanted something, and so they're performing this yajna, that yajna, and so on and so forth. But then, my father is in his 80s, and my mother is in her 70s, and recently they did some kind of yajna, vivaha yajna they performed, which was like very special kind of vivaha yajna, where they kind of married a banyan tree to a peepal tree. This is, mentioned in the Vedas, this kind of a marriage. And for me, it was like, come on, why are you doing this? In the sense, like, even though it is authorized in the Vedas, but still, why do you want to marry a banyan tree to a peepal tree kind of thing? And then they told me point blank that, maybe this is the last major function, large major occasion during our lifetime, which we are hosting. And the main reason why we are performing this particular Vivaha Yagya of a banyan tree and a peepal tree is just so that we can call as many people as possible, feed them sumptuously, and give them gifts. And they didn't spend so much of money they spent. Why? See, that's what I was talking about. That craving to give had kind of taken hold. So it works. I felt it works. The Vedic process works. So initially, all through my childhood, all the yajnas that they performed was all want driven. But towards the end, the yajna that they were performing was like purpose driven. What want was fulfilled by marrying a banyan tree to a people tree. But they just wanted that satisfaction of serving, feeding people, giving in charity and things like that. So they had developed that craving. Anyway, so in the modern day world, wherein we are so much far removed from the Vedic culture, Vedic civilization, what yajnas can we perform? So that is why yajna sankirtana praya yajanti sumedasa. It is said in the scriptures. That is the most feasible form of yajna performances in the modern day world is sankirtana yajna. And even in the Gita, Krishna mentions yajnanam japa yajñosmi, that the best of all yajnas is japa yajna. Now, sankirtana and japa, they're almost the same. Japa means chanting of the names of God silently, and sankirtan means chanting the names of God loudly and collectively. So it's not ISKCON that is saying this, but it's the Kali Santaran Upanishad that is mentioned. This Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So when we perform the Sankirtana Yagya, or when we perform this Japa Yagya, we chant this Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Ram. Now, Prabhupada, he gave a very beautiful understanding of the mood in which we should chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is very much in line with the principles of Yajna. So Prabhupada said, the mood of chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra should be that, no, the word Hara means the energy of God, and Krishna means God, Ram means God. So we're appealing to God and his energy, that please engage me in your service. That is the mood in which we should chant the Hare Krishna mantra. So the mood of service is inculcated in Sankirtan Yagya or Japa Yagya. And Prabhupada also said, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, he also said that when we chant this Hare Krishna mantra, we should be chanting it in a mood of dependency. And when we chant it in the mood of dependency, then again, the tendency to be a controller, the tendency to be the doer, that is contracted. So, perfectly in line with the traditional yagyas is the Sankirtana yagya or the Japa yagya. So, we can be working in the outside world, but if we take out time every single day to perform this yagya, Japa yagya, Sankirtana yagya, then what happens? For a period of time, we can also make this transition from being want driven to being purpose driven. So that's all. And then that's when we make a transition from being a karmi to a karma yogi. So I'll end here. So if anybody has any questions, I will take it. Or we'll end here.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hmm.
Prabhu, just by performing Japa Yajna, others also are getting benefited and we are also achieving the real purpose. Can you explain it?
See, when we are performing this Japa Yagya, when we are chanting this Hare Krishna mantra, what happens is we naturally, our heart, our consciousness grows. And as I was telling before, when we put God in the center of our lives, when we actually make the goal of our life service to God, then what happens is we end up rendering service to everybody connected with God. That's what will naturally happen, because a heart that truly loves God cannot but love the part and parcels of God. Somebody who is truly serving God will naturally end up serving everybody connected with God. So this Japa Yagya or Sankirtana Yagya puts us directly in touch with God. As I was saying, the meaning, the mood in which this mantra should be chanted is, please engage me in your service. So when Krishna hears our appeal or prayer, and when we actually develop this consciousness of doing everything as a service to God, as a service to Sri Krishna, we will find ourselves becoming more empathetic towards all living entities. It's a natural consequence of a heart which is driven to serve God. It comes out naturally. It's a natural byproduct. On a more practical level, even Srila Prabhupada, he instituted Sankirtan Yagya in such a way, he always emphasized that whenever you have Sankirtan Yagya, whenever you organize Sankirtan Yagya at your home, it should always be followed by a distribution of prasadam. So Sankirtan Yagya and prasadam distribution goes hand in hand. So invite people at your home to perform Sankirtan Yagya, to come together and chant the holy names of God in various melodious tunes together. And the function should end like in any other traditional yagya performance through distribution of prasad, which is nothing but food that is offered to God. So on a more practical, down to earth level, even in the process of performing Sankirtan Yagya, you develop the habit of giving, serving people, feeding others, and things like that. But on a more esoteric level, as our consciousness actually becomes more and more dovetailed towards the service of God, we become naturally more inclined to serve every living entity who is connected with God. I hope that answers your question. So, yeah, there's a question here. What is the difference between requirements and needs? Uh, I don't know. Uh, Requirements are needs. Needs are requirements. These are synonymous terms, I believe. And then there's another question: Is Varna ashram followed in Kali Yuga? Not exactly. Varna ashram is not followed in Kali Yuga, but that is one of the long-term goals of ISKCON, to re-establish Varnashrama system. Because the essence of Varnashrama system is nothing but a society where people acknowledge each other's interdependence with a common objective of service to God. That is the whole objective of Varnashrama system. And each person is able to contribute towards the welfare of society as per their psychophysical requirement, or as per their psychophysical nature. The society where, see, it's like, see, the way the cosmos is built, the way the ecology is there, the way in which the ecosystem is built by God is that, you must have heard about the food chain in your biology classes. Now, the ecosystem is built in such a way that each species, the requirement of each species is met, that each species of life gets the food that it wants. At the same time, the entire ecology is balanced. They go hand in hand. While each individual species requirements are met, simultaneously, the requirement of the entire ecosystem is also met. That's how God has built the ecology, the ecosystem. When needs are taken care of the micro level, at the macro level, automatically the needs at the macro level are automatically taken care of. So similarly, when it comes to human society, God has given the Varnashrama system. And the Varnashrama system is designed in such a way that while each individual is trying to fulfill their own personal needs of trying to engage in an occupation as per their psychological nature or their physiological nature, simultaneously the requirements of the entire society is also met. Every individual is happy, and overall the needs of society is also taken care of. Overall, the society is in a balanced state, just like the ecology is in a balanced state. And just like when it comes to ecology, when we try to kind of meddle with the different species of life, then we end up imbalancing the entire ecosystem. Similarly, when human beings meddle with the Varnashrama system, which is happening in the modern day world, you see there is so much of unrest in society as a whole, because the needs of each individual is not perfectly met. So the Varnashrama system has to be brought back for the well-being of every individual, as well as for the peace of society as a whole, micro level to macro level. So that's like a long-term goal of ISKCON. What is the path of purposeful life in Bhagavad Gita that you mentioned, Prabhu? Is it 12th chapter? Hare Krishna. So Krishna in the 3rd chapter, 30th verse, he gives us the essence of Karma Yoga. He says, Mayi Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa Nirashir Nirmamo Bhutva Yudhyasya Vigatajvara, he says. So he basically says, Mayi Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa. Whatever you do it as a service to me. Mayi Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa. And do it in a selfless spirit, freed from selfishness. In a spirit of sannyas, in a mood of selflessness, do all activities as a service to me. Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasya adhyatma chetasa. That should be your consciousness. And then he says, nirashir. He becomes more specific. Nirashi means devoid of selfishness. Nirmamo. Nirashi. Devoid of selfishness. Nirmamo means devoid of egoism. Without the misconception of being the controller, without the misconception of being the doer, which are egoistic conceptions. So freed from egoism and freed from selfishness, render service to me. This is the essence of Karma Yoga, which is kind of encapsulated in one verse, 3.30 of the Bhagavad Gita. The entire Karma Yoga is summarized in one verse. So yes, so it is given in the 3rd chapter, which is Prabhupada called the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Karma Yoga. So I think that's about it. We have already reached our time. Anything else? Some question. Does disappearing of Varnashrama lead to unemployed? Yes, it does. So as I was saying, when we meddle with the Varnashrama system, then what happens is there's a ecological, like it's like equivalent to an imbalanced ecology. And unbalanced ecology, things start going wrong in major ways. So similarly, a society in which Varnashrama system is not followed, there will be chaos at an individual level and there will be chaos at the level of society. So at an individual level, people, there will be rise of unemployment and unrest, general sense of dissatisfaction in life, because people are not engaged as per their psychophysical nature. People tend to, in the modern day world, people tend to uh, find their employment going by the trends, what's fashionable. So what's fashionable, they do it rather than following the needs of their own body, their own mind. Because see, in a perfect Varnashrama society, the contribution of every member of the system is being honored, it is being appreciated, it is being acknowledged. But in the modern day world, only certain occupations are given more respect, more honor. And so people tend to gravitate towards those occupations, even though it may not fall in line with their psychophysical nature. It's like, my nephew from my mother's side, he's, what do you call him? My cousin from my mother's side. He's a landlord. He's a landlord. He's barely in his 30s. He's a landlord. And psychophysically, I can say he's very, his his body and his mind is adept to take care of a huge farm that he has, and he can make a lot of money and lead a happy life off the farm. But then he sees his cousins, somebody's a manager, somebody's a doctor, somebody's an engineer, and then and people don't tend to honor, respect, acknowledge a farmer. So even though he's a landlord, he neglects his farm and he goes to some city and is working as a manager, earning some amount of money. And it's pure foolishness. And his farm is getting neglected. It's such a huge farm. And actually, he could have much better lifestyle. He could be personally be happy also. And he could be contributing more towards society also through his farm. But unfortunately, because Varnashrama system, and as I said, the foundation of Varnashrama system is to acknowledge and appreciate each other's contribution. That's absent in the modern day world. And so people tend to move towards that which gains them more respect and honor and acceptability. And they tend to neglect those occupations which are not fashionable, which could be otherwise be in tune with their psychophysical nature. And so this also leads to unemployment. People leave their lands in the villages, they move towards move towards the cities, searching after glamorous life. And so city population rises, rising unemployment in the cities. Yes, Varnashrama system does lead to unemployment. Okay, thank you very much for your kind intention. It was my honor and privilege to be a part of this entire thing, the 2-day class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, and thank you all to all the participants. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we'll also update about other programs, and if also those who are in Bombay, Prabhuji takes some classes in Bombay, we can definitely update about those classes and study circles in the group. Thank you all. Just stay in the group for a couple of days till we share the recordings and other updates. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.